Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. This is actually a pretty good crowd for our annual senior parent night, financial aid night. This year we've combined the two evenings into one evening, and that might have contributed to the good turnout. But I'm glad everybody is here. My name is Adam Leach. I'm the Director of Guidance here at Bangor High School. And for the first hour, I'm going to give you a little bit of a presentation, an overview of what the college application process looks like, specifically focusing on the jobs that need to be done, who does them, and when do we do them. And I think those are the three big questions that most people usually have. Making sure that nobody misses a deadline or who's supposed to do what when. So we'll go through those questions. Also this evening we have Nikki Vachon here, is from Finance Authority of Maine. And for the second hour, she'll take over and talk to you about finances and basically how are you going to pay for college and the different options and opportunities that are out there. So also I'd like to let you know too that we are videotaping the process tonight. So if we're talking too fast in the interest of time, if you want to be able to review this is going to be posted on YouTube, right? It's going to be on YouTube, and you'll be able to call it up and kind of review it. To share it with your sons and daughters if they're not here tonight, to share it with spouses and whoever else might want to see it as well. Okay? So if you have any questions while we're going, please feel free to ask them. We'll try to answer everybody's questions. Certainly after we're done with the presentation, if you want to stick around and ask any individual questions that are specific to you, that's one of the, you got us here, so feel free to ask any of those burning questions. One of the things that's important to know about the whole process of college admissions, sending your sons and daughters off to college, is every single one of you might be in a very different situation, choosing different colleges, different majors, you have different financial circumstances, so every single one of you is going to have a unique set of circumstances, and you want to make sure that you get all of your questions answered, regardless of the situation you're in, colleges that your son or daughter are picking from, and so forth. So we'll get started here. Just very quickly, what I want to look at is I'm going to give you some introductions to some people here at Bangor High School whose job it is to support your sons and daughters in their college application process. Also, I want to say most of what we're going to talk about tonight is really geared towards students looking at four-year colleges in pursuit of a bachelor's degree. Certainly, a two-year college or university is it's a slightly different process, but I think if you're thinking about a community college or a two-year associate's degree, certainly the process is very similar. You just might overshoot a little bit, and that's okay. It's better to overshoot than undershoot, I think. We're going to look at a little bit of the calendar. One of the handouts that I've left out front is just a very simple sketch calendar of when things need to be done. We'll look at the college application process and all of the different parts to the application. Financial aid, I'm actually cutting that for the most part out of my presentation and leaving that to Nikki to present on that part. We'll take a look at what happens once students get accepted and then they commit to colleges, and a few things about what will happen over the course of next summer leading into going to college. First, introductions. There are three counselors in the guidance office right now that are going to be working with your students, the senior class. Myself, Mr. D'Arspino, and Mrs. Foley we have different parts of the alphabet, and your son or daughter is assigned to one of us. But certainly, the guidance office gets very busy. And what it's really important for them to do is to get in to see us early and often, make appointments to see us, If there are any burning questions, they need to come in and see us. Even if it's just a flyby, you're going to come in and you just got a quick question, any of us can answer the question. As well as Mrs. Eyre and Mr. Clement, we have two other guidance counselors that are working with the freshmen and juniors. They can help out as well. So there are plenty of people in guidance that can help you out. Ms. Masson is also our secretary, and there are lots of things that she can do. She can get you copies of your transcripts. She can. There are lots of things she can do to help you if a counselor is busy. Ms. Pacifici is our registrar, and she's the gatekeeper. She's the one that makes sure that all of us are keeping up on our end of the bargain, our end of the process, making sure that transcripts are sent out to colleges, making sure that grades are correct and that the transcripts are accurate. She's meticulous about making sure all that stuff is accurate. So that's all of our team here at Bangor High School. Probably the most important thing that I'd like to stress is that, and I say this as a dad also. I have a daughter who is a junior in college. I have a son who is a senior in high school. So I'm not just going through this process as somebody standing up here. I'm going through this process right along with you and the schools that he's applying to and trying to figure out how to pay for 2 kids in college and all of those kinds of things. So I'm sharing in the experience. But probably the most important thing that you can do is stress that your son or daughter is the captain of the team. They're the ones going to college, not us. We're not going to college. We're sending them to college. They are the ones that need to take the lead. So when phone calls need to be made to admissions counselors, they're the ones that should do it. When an email needs to be sent, they're the ones that should do it. When they have questions, they're the ones that should ask the questions. Now, like any good team, there is a behind-the-scenes group of people that are pushing and shoving, right? The parents, the counselors, the teachers, we're the ones that keep doing the check-ins. Did you do this? Did you send in your application? Did you fill out this paper? So on and so forth. We're also the advisors. We're the ones that make them think about their decisions. Why did you choose that college? Anything. It could be the distance that they'll have to travel. What about if you want to come home for Thanksgiving? How are you going to get home? How much is that going to cost? All of those kinds of things that a 17 or 18-year-old young man or woman is not going to think of. We're there to keep them thinking. But it's really important to make sure that the student themselves takes charge of their college application. Because they're the ones that are going to go to college. They're the ones that need to be successful once they get there. So they need to be the most active person in the process. So the college application process has many parts to it. It's not just filling out an application and sending it in. Letters of recommendation are needed. They have to write an essay. They have to decide in advance what major they might like to pursue. That has an impact on admissions. They have to have their test scores sent. They may have to do a college visit. They may have to conduct an interview, participate in an interview. And they have to have the conversation with a school official, their guidance counselor, to make sure that we know where they've applied. And every year we run into a situation very common where a student says, hey, a school didn't get my transcript. Well, they didn't tell us to send the transcript. That doesn't magically happen without, the schools don't notify us, hey, we want the transcript for so-and-so. The student has to notify us to send documents. So they have to keep the lines of communication flowing quite well. I'm going to pick apart these different things a little bit. Letters of recommendation. One reason why I put this up front is because now's the time to get those letters. You have to allow the author of a letter of recommendation you have to allow them time to get the letter written in time for the deadline. If the deadline is tomorrow, you're not going to get a very good letter if you ask the person to write it today. So the other thing too is when you're making a request for a letter of recommendation, the student should be asking somebody that knows them very well and can say a lot of good things about them. But it's okay for a student to say to a teacher, for example, this is why I'm picking you. I think you could tell a really good story. Do you remember that project we worked on in class? I really like that. It's okay to kind of coach the letter writer into what you want them to say. Right? To be totally honest, as a letter writer, I appreciate that. I'm going to ask my students, what do you want me to write about you? What are the characteristics that you need? And as we get along here a little bit, you'll understand why. Because you want the letter to be as interesting as you can possibly make it. And it has to fit as part of the puzzle of your application. So your guidance counselor is going to write one letter of recommendation. Right? There are schools out there where the counselor doesn't need to, but those are few and far between. It can be assumed, but it still is a courtesy that the student should request that their guidance counselor write a letter of recommendation. Okay? At least one other letter of recommendation from a teacher. Somebody that can speak to the academic ability of the student. I'll talk a little bit in a second about the kinds of people to ask. On all college applications, there are required numbers of letters of recommendation. Some schools require one letter, but they might also say, we will allow 3. And my advice to students is if it says that it allows 3, you should do 3. You're trying to put your best foot forward, right? So a college application in which the student does the minimum amount required isn't necessarily going to impress the other side. Doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong, but the more they allow, the better chance you have of having that good story be told that gets you into that school. So if a school says they'll allow 3 letters of recommendation, I really suggest that you get 3 letters of recommendation. So they have to talk to the teachers fairly early, as soon as possible. That's why we're having this meeting on September 13th, so that there is time, so that you're not putting pressure on the letter writer. We have lots of we also, on the opening week of school, I did a presentation with the teachers to try to give them a little bit of advice on what college admissions is looking for from letters of recommendation. So the teachers know what to do. They're good writers, but you have to understand that we have 280 students in the senior class. If all of them ask for 1, 2, or 3 letters of recommendation, that's a lot of time spent writing letters. The students that are going to get the best letters are the ones that get to the front of the line. We are human beings, and we're teaching classes, we've got papers to grade, and all of these things going on, families of our own, and some of them will have 50 or 60 letters to write. So if you get to the front of the line, you'll get that first attention, and you'll probably get a pretty good letter. The teachers will certainly appreciate you working with them well in advance. There is an opportunity to get other letters of recommendation. Coaches, pastors, or priests at church. There are lots of people that can offer good insight into the character and personality of the applicant. So don't be afraid to go outside of the box to get a letter of recommendation. Just make sure that you get academic letters of recommendation first. Make sure that you meet the requirement for academic letters from teachers before you go outside of the academic realm. One of the best people to write a letter of recommendation is a coach or a club advisor, because they'll know the student on a little bit more of a personal level, and they're still a teacher, so they still have that qualification of knowing them in the classroom as well. It's important not to try to worry about gaming the system. Everybody wants to ask an English teacher to write their letter. Because they write the best, right? Of course, English teachers, they are going to not have run-on sentences, and their punctuation's all going to be in the right place. But that teacher may not know you the best. College admissions really isn't too worried about a punctuation error. They want to hear a good story. So go to the people that know you the best, who can tell the best story. Be sure to ask their permission. When you're filing your application online, as I'll speak to in just a minute, you will make an electronic request. So the teacher will get an email from Common App for them to upload a letter. You don't want the email from Common App to be the first time that that teacher realized you wanted them to write a letter. You should go, the student should go to the teacher in person, face to face, and say, I'd really like to have you write a letter for me. Make that personal connection. That's going to help the quality of your letter in the long run. Don't be afraid to give them instructions. As I said, you know, hey, I enjoyed that chemistry project we did in class. I really think that showed my learning style. And, okay, give them some pointers. The teacher has 100 or so students every year. They may not remember that particular project as fondly as you do. So, you know, refresh the teacher's memory, and they'll be able to write you a better letter. You might even give them a resume, give them some other background information that they could include in their letter. And don't be shy about asking. Yes, it is a busy task. Yes, it does cause a lot of work for teachers, but we're paid for that. It's part of our job to write these letters. So don't be shy about it. Go to the people that you want to have write your letters. The essay. So while teachers are writing your letters of recommendation, the student also has to do some writing as well. The college application includes a student essay. If you're applying to any school that is highly selective, that means that they have a large number of applicants and a small number of acceptances. How do they know the difference? You got an A in AP Chemistry. You got an A in AP US History. So did millions of other kids across the world. So how do they pick you out of the pile? Well, the letter of recommendation is one way, and William Fitzsimmons is the Dean of Admissions at Harvard. He was at a conference, and this is his quote. He called the essay the ultimate tiebreaker. So the Dean of Admissions at Harvard University, one of the most prestigious universities in the entire world, said to a crowd of guidance counselors that what it comes down to is who is going to be the best roommate. And how do we know who is going to be the best roommate? It's not the smartest person. It's not the person with the best transcript. It's the person that is the most human person, that is fun to be around, that is engaging, that's intelligent, that has a good conversation, but you also don't mind hanging out and watching TV. Right? So that's where the essay comes in. It's kind of the blood and guts of an application. Everything else is just data. A's and B's, GPAs, test scores. I want to know if somebody is interesting and fun, and that they're going to be my friend when I get to college. So that's where the essay comes in. The do's and don'ts. Good things to do with the essay: tell a story, take a risk. Don't lie, don't make something up, but tell a story about yourself that will get you out of the pile. Schools that have a highly selective process have thousands of applications. Northeastern University will have 48,000 applications this year. How do you get your application out of that big pile into the little pile that might get you accepted? So don't be plain, don't be boring. Take a little bit of a challenge or a risk with the essay. This is where advice is so important. Students should be asking moms and dads, what do you think I should write about? What's an interesting part about me? What do you like most about me? Ask teachers, ask guidance counselors, ask friends. Compare stories, right? That's really important in writing the essay. Things that you shouldn't do, bragging, all right? They don't want brats coming to college. That's not going to impress anybody by you telling them how great you are at everything. Be humble, right? And show a good human side of you. Show them that you're somebody they will enjoy having on their campus. And don't repeat the obvious. So you did a great job in all of your classes. I can see that on your transcript. I don't need to read about it in your essay also. So don't repeat the obvious. That's also good advice for letters of recommendation. It's boring and obvious information if a teacher says, well, I had so-and-so in my class and they got an A. I know that. I've got your transcript. Tell us something a little bit more interesting. The Common App that I'm going to talk about in just a second has 5 prompts that you can use to give the human part of your application. You can pick any of the prompts to write your essay. It's a 650-word essay. No more than 650 words. So about a page and a half. You can talk about a place where you feel perfectly content. At camp on the lake. Right? One of the best essays I read recently was about going on a canoe trip. Right? She talked about being out in the early morning and hearing the sounds and the sights and the smells, and that's where she was content. And that student got into Dartmouth. Time where you experienced a failure, right? In education, the learning experiences, the wins and the losses, you learn more on the times you lose. So in an experience where you had experienced failure and how you reacted to it, that's a good one. In your high school experience, you've transitioned from being a child to an adult. Talk about one of those experiences. Right? Overcoming a bullying incident, or who knows what it might be. Having your growth spurt and finally being able to compete at a higher level in athletics, and how that changed. Who knows what it might be, but it's a transition from child to adulthood. You might write about another person. When you talk about being humble, who are the people that influence you? You also might talk about a specific event in your life that is central to understanding your personality. So all of those things are good. Those are the prompts. You have to pick one, and your essay has to fit into one of those 5 categories. The essay has to be very, very important. Your English teachers are going to be doing it in class with students. But again, get outside of just English teachers. They're going to help with the skeleton of the essay. They're going to help it be creative. They're going to give you advice. But what I like to tell students is get different perspectives on your essay. Share it with your guidance counselor, with mom and dad, with a brother or sister, with a friend, a neighbor. Have all kinds of people read it and offer feedback. In a college admissions process, it's very likely that 3 or 4 different people are going to read the essay. And it may be, and certainly in an Ivy League situation, you might have to impress all of them. So don't just try to impress the English teacher, try to impress many different people and get some different perspectives. Reread, revise, that's why it's important to start now. If they haven't already started their essay, that's what I would go home tonight and say, start doing. Start writing your essay. Get a rough draft, get something down, get us something to work with, brainstorm. And revise it right up until the date that you put your application in. Common App. Now, I've been a guide to Bangor High School now for 5 years. In my first year, we sent out about 500 college applications. 2 years later, we sent around 950. The change that happened in just those couple of years is that everything became electronic. So it became very, very simple to apply to multiple schools. So students went from applying to 1 or 2 or 3 colleges to applying to 6 or 7. The most I have seen in the last 5 years, one student applied to 19 schools. That's probably too many. They probably would have been just fine applying to 7 or 8, but that's what they chose to do. 7, 8, that way you have a few schools that you're pretty sure you'll get into, you'll have a few that are kind of your targets, and you'll have a few that might be a bit of a stretch or a reach to get into, where the admissions process is pretty rigorous. The Common App is the most widely used online application. So instead of going to every college separately and filling out a separate application, you can fill out one application and you can send it to all of the schools on your list. Now, there are some schools that don't use Common App, and certainly in talking with your guidance counselor, you'll figure those ones out and look at those application processes. Regardless, you're going to find that every school has an online application, and that's what they will prefer you use. Okay, so Common App, get familiar with it. The student sets up a free account. You should never have to pay for this until you actually submit the application to a college, and you pay the application fee right through Common App. But to set up an account costs nothing. Fill out all the application costs nothing. It's just you pay the fee to the particular school. It's a fairly long and involved process. There's a lot of information to fill in. There are resume questions. There are family background questions. There's information about demographics, and you have grades and transcripts. That's right through Common App. They will request your counselor to write a letter, and your teachers. When a student asks me to be their counselor, and they put me in their Common App account, I get an email. And that email tells me that this student has requested my letter and my help, and then I can go right into their account and upload all of the things that I need to do. The teachers receive the same thing. They'll get a request via email, gives them a link, and a place where they can go to upload their letter of recommendation. One thing I didn't mention about letters that I should is that the FERPA requirement, Federal Rights and Privacies Act, it's going to ask the student to waive that right. And it's important that you do waive the right. What that means is that letters of recommendation will be confidential. The student will never actually see the letter. So they're written in privacy from the teacher to the university admissions. It's important to waive that right so that on the other side, they know that the letter is not coerced or coached, that the letter will be honest. Okay? So it's important to waive that right. When the teacher uploads it, it goes directly off to the college. The student is able to log in and see if the teacher did their job, to see if I did my job. So they know if all of the people that they have on board with their application the student can't be in charge. If I haven't uploaded my letter of recommendation, a student can knock on my door and say, hey, when are you going to put my letter of recommendation on? Or when are you going to upload my transcript? Right? I mean, people do get busy and forget, but that's one of the great things about Common App, is they can stay on top of it. And they should. If you've asked a teacher to write a letter and they say yes, then you have the right to expect that letter to be written. If the teacher hasn't gotten to it and is getting close to your deadline, make sure that you do get a reminder out to them and say, hey, don't forget me. Okay? I also can see everything that's going on in the process. When a student requests my participation, I get like a main page with all of my students on it, and I can see if they've completed their process. I can see the schools on their list. I can tell if they've actually submitted the application. And if I see deadlines approaching, I can call them in and say, hey, you haven't submitted this yet. Are you going to? If you change your mind, what's up? And it can kind of generate a conversation now. Right, so it's really a great tool. Common App is fantastic. Right, Common App used to be done on paper. They don't even have a paper option anymore. It's all online. Ahead of the application process, you actually have to figure out where you're going to apply. And there are lots of things that will affect how a student decides where to go to college. There are search tools. Two of my favorites, there is one called College Raptor that I like to use because you can incorporate financial considerations right into your search engine, and it will generate a list of schools. But the College Board still has one of the most simple, easy to use college search engines that you can find. Right on collegeboard.org, there's on the search bar, it says College Search. You get to a page that looks like this. It's called Big Future. And there are these filters on the side. A student can say, all right, I've got almost 4,000 schools to pick from. How do I narrow that down? Well, a student might say, I want to stay in New England. I want to stay in the Northeast. There's 2 or 3 states that I might like to go to, else maybe Virginia or Florida, wherever. And they can use the filter, and they can filter by location. And then that 3,963 will shrink down. It'll start to help the student look at individual schools. You can go by, does it have the major I want? If a student is interested in economics, does a school have economics? You can set it by a type of school. A student may want to go to a large school in an urban setting. They may want to go to a small private school in a rural setting. You can set these filters in a lot of ways and narrow that list way, way down, based on all of these filters over here. And you see these colleges will start to thin out. And then you can click on one of the schools and you can start to explore individual schools one at a time. And you can look at what are the application requirements? How good do my SATs need to be? How much is it going to cost to go there? Do they have scholarships and financial aid? This is all a great place to look to find some answers about the school. You can find out how difficult is it to get in. This school is somewhat selective. 65% of the applicants get in. You can see how many apply, how many are admitted. You can see what requirements you have to fulfill in high school, what your SAT scores probably need to be considered. Do they accept AP classes for credit? There's a lot of data that goes right into this. It's really a fantastic tool for narrowing down your search. If anybody is really interested in a highly selective school, In-state, I would say Colby, Bates, and Bowdoin. What you want to do, and now this is something that is mostly me trying to read between the lines. I've visited a lot of schools. I've seen some students that I thought were sure bets not get in. I've seen some students that I didn't think would get in but did. And it seems like the common denominator is how much interest do you show in them? You know, if a school gets 40 or 50,000 applications, there has to be a way for them to narrow down that list. And a simple way to do that is that they look at the students that show interest, the greatest degree of interest in them. So did you go and visit? Did you take a tour? If they offered an interview, did you do it? Did you sign up to receive information? You know, if they know you visited their website, then visited their campus, and then sat down and spoke to one of their representatives, that's going to show a higher degree of interest from you in them. Because there are lots of students, like the one that sent out 19 applications, that said, I'm going to send out a whole bunch of applications and see what happens. Many, many, many students will do that. But in my opinion, a lot of that might just be wasting money on application fees. Because if you don't go visit, if you don't show a lot of extra interest, you're probably not helping your chances of getting in. So college visits and college interviews, when possible, are very important. Well, what if your student wants to apply to the University of Southern California? Are you going to put them on an airplane and say, go to Southern California for a couple of days and check out the school? You're probably not going to do that. But the student certainly could pick up the telephone and call the admissions office and say, you know, I live in Maine. Is there an alum that I could speak to? Or do you have people around the country that might be a little closer that I could sit down and talk to? That's generating interest. So while you might not be able to head off all the way across the country, whatever you can do to show that you're an interested student. It's demonstrating that sincere interest in the school that comes from that. Yes?
There's Skype also, because we Skyped with the college in Eastern Washington State.
Yep, good point. FaceTime, Skype, they might be able to set up that kind of interview for you as well. It's the wonders of this age that we're in that you might not necessarily have to make a physical journey. The one thing that I would say is if you Washington or in Southern California and you wanted to go to that school, you applied, you got in. I guess what I would say is that before you actually decide to attend, visit to make sure you're making a good choice. To make sure that's where you really want to be. It's kind of hard to commit to 4 years at college if you've never actually even been there. You wouldn't necessarily buy a car without having test driven it first, right? Think about that process with college applications. The dreaded standardized test scores and what to do about SATs. I think that there's a lot of worry and stress that comes from what kind of test scores. I need to keep retaking the tests. Evidence shows that a student that takes the SAT twice is probably going to max their score. So they take the test once, they get a score, they take it again. Usually the score will go up the second time they take it, but a third or fourth time, rarely does the test score go up after that. So my advice to students is take the test twice. You should plan on taking it twice. All of them took the test in April. Right, so they should have at least one try at the SAT already under their belt. If they haven't taken it a second time yet, it's worth another shot. I mean, if I told you, look, give me $50 and I'll give you $8,000, would you do it? I mean, I'm not running for president, but if I said, you give me $50 and I'm pretty sure that you'll get $8,000 back, it's probably worth the $50. So, and I'll show what I mean by that in just a second. But on this left side right here, for admissions purposes, like how important is an SAT or an ACT test at getting into a college? I think if they don't look at a test and say, well, this student got a 1520 and this one got a 1510, so we're taking the 1520. Essentially, those two students are equal. They're not going to use the test that specific for admissions. So on College Board, you will see under the SAT test, you'll see a band that looks like this, between 400 and 1600. And this black spot represents the middle 50% of the admitted students and what they got on their SATs. The middle 50%. So there's 25% that scored lower and 25% that scored higher. If your student gets into that band, that's probably good enough. I say probably. It's worth another try to maybe get to the top end of the band, or maybe even out on the top end. It doesn't rule you out if you got the low, because 25% of the students that got admitted scored below that band. Okay, but certainly the higher you are and into that band, the stronger your application chances are. Financial aid, and Nikki's going to talk more about that, but I do want to mention something that's really important, is that there is merit-based aid attached to test scores. I'll show you a graphic here in just a second with the University of Maine and how they dole out merit-based aid based on your grade point average and your SAT scores, and how that can translate into some savings for college. The SAT-2 subject tests. Some of the schools that you are going to apply to might require more tests. The College Board has, in addition to the regular SAT, something called subject tests, the SAT-2s. They're 1 hour long. You can take 3 of them in one sitting, and that's usually what colleges, if they require SAT-2s at all, that's usually what they require you to do, is to take 3 of them. There's right across the subject areas, U.S. history, there's world history, there's chemistry, biology, math, they're all subject areas. So you can pick the ones you think you'll do the best at, sign up for them, take them. So it's important to pay attention if a school requires SAT-2s, because you're going to need to get those pretty soon. Question? I didn't quite hear you, sorry. Yeah, the numbers right here in this block, that represents the middle 50% of the, all I did was screenshot that off of the college.
What are the numbers?
Oh, what are they? So this is 400, that would be the lowest score on an SAT. 1600 would be the highest. So this says 1380 to 1530. Yeah, so on whatever college that was, I think it was Colby, actually. That was the one I was playing around with earlier. So that would be the middle 50% of all the test takers at that school. If you look at each individual school, that band might be a little different. A school that puts less weight on the test, that band might be further down here. That one's pretty rigorous. Did I answer that question? Yeah, okay. All right. So do look at the colleges that you're picking out. If it requires an SAT-2, there is a test date in November. You have to sign up by the 1st of October for that test. There's another test date in December. You have to sign up by the beginning of November for that test. So it's important to check test dates and test requirements for the schools that you're looking at. It's also important that you let the guidance counselor know. I mean, that's one of the first things that the guidance counselor is going to pick up on. If your student says, I want to apply to Cornell, the guidance counselor is going to know. SAT tubes, you got to take them. If you haven't already, you've got to sign up. You know, they can also look at your existing SAT score and be able to make a good recommendation if you should retake the test to improve your scores. So communicating with a counselor, really important. This is the graphic from the University of Maine. I screenshotted this right off of their admissions website. This is the merit aid package that your son or daughter would qualify for. In each of these levels, the student has to have a minimum of a 3.0 GPA. That's a weighted GPA as well. If they get an 1120 on the SAT, that student will get $2,000 a year or $8,000 over the course of a 4-year education. You'll notice that on each level, it's a 3.0. But the SAT score goes up. For a 1270, they'll pay you $4,000 a year, or deducted from your tuition, actually. So you go from $8,000 to $16,000. You get up to a 1340, and now it's $6,000 a year. If they get a 1450, they'll qualify for $8,000 a year in merit-based aid. That means it's based on how good they did on grades and test scores. So $8,000, $32,000, you can get 4 years of college education for less than the price of 3. So that's a pretty sweet deal. So when your son or daughter grumbles at the idea of going and taking the SAT again, at your urging, remind them that you're paying the bill and that you would like a little bit of help. Right? Yes?
If you're going to have your child take it again, learn that they don't send their application to college?
Okay, so the question is if they're going to take the test again, should they not send their application in? You can go ahead and send the application in and then just forward the scores once they arrive. So don't hold up the entire process waiting for a test score. Go ahead and send it, and then when the test scores get in, you can send them along. Okay? Yes? That's a good question. The question is, what about taking the ACT instead of the SAT? What I usually say is it's up to the student. The reason why I prefer the SAT is because as freshmen, they take the PSAT 8-9. They take the PSAT as sophomores. They take the PSAT again at the beginning of their junior year. And all of those tests are formatted exactly the same way the SAT is. So you've essentially practiced that test 3 times over. The ACT is a different test. Now, if you don't mind taking tests and you want to give it a try, I say go for it. It's not a bad test. It's a fine test. It's not necessarily easy. So it's certainly up to the individual student. If they feel up to it, say, hey, yeah, I'll give it a try. You know, that when a student has that kind of an attitude, I would say, yeah, if they have a positive attitude towards the test. But if the student, I don't want to take another test, it may not show much different. The test scores usually come back pretty consistent. When I see a student that has an ACT and an SAT, they're usually pretty close to the same. You're not going to bomb one and do great on the other. They're usually pretty similar. Yes?
So obviously, SATs are still being weighted, but I've heard rumor, I guess, that SATs are going away, or what?
Depends on the university. There are universities that are test optional. Though I would say that those are few and far between. Bowdoin is test optional. But certainly if you did the SAT and did a great job on it, I'd still want to use it. It's one more piece of data that they can say, oh, yes, this is a good thing. There are schools out there that don't use them, but not very many. As much as we would love to see standardized tests go away, they're not. They're still there. Case in point, UMaine's using them to give out money. So, okay? And UMaine's not alone. There's a lot of them that do that. Yes?
If they take a second SAT and they did really well on the first one,
Uh-huh.
do they get to, and say maybe they didn't do as well on the second one, do they get to choose what scores and are those scores set?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, if they take it twice, what if their second score is lower than their first one? And do you get to choose which one to send? Most schools will want you to send both scores. And then they'll super score. So if you did better in reading and writing on one and better in math on the other, they can split the test score up. So you can take reading from one and math from the other and put them together and get a better score. So that's helpful. Right? And it's very common for that to happen, to be totally honest. Some students are better at math, some students are better at reading and writing, and they work to get up the other one that they might not have been as strong in. Yes?
Quickly, have you heard if some colleges or universities will waive the application fee if the student actually calls the admissions office and asks for that to happen?
There are lots of ways that colleges will waive application fees. Calling and asking probably isn't one of them. There may be a university that's out there that does it that way. I'm not familiar with them. If students qualify under any kind of income guidelines or anything like that, there can be fee waivers that are granted through the guidance office, through the sending school. They also sometimes, if you go to the university and participate in some of their activities, they might waive the fee. Which reminds me, right? The University of Maine on October 19th is going to do an app day here at Bangor High School. Anybody that has an application into the University of Maine by October 12th can participate in the app day here at Bangor High School. What they'll do is they'll send their admissions counselors here. They will interview the applicant face-to-face, review their application, and give the student the decision right there.
Would you repeat that day that the interview is?
The interview is on the 19th of October. And if they participate in that, they'll waive the fee. So it saves $40. Yep.
If a student does that, for whatever reason, the university turns them down, does that preclude them from applying at a later date?
That's a very good question. No. In fact, what the admissions folks will do is they'll accept, they might deny, or they might hold it for more information. So they might hold over for waiting for the semester transcript, or senior year semester transcript, to see how they do there. They might want them to retake the SAT again. And they'll provide that advice right there, face to face. Right? Yeah? Yeah, they have to have their application done to the University of Maine by the 12th of October. So about a month from now. And the actual app day will be on the 19th. We're going to get information out to the students. That date was set today, by the way. So the students don't know about that yet. I'm going to get that information out to them this week. Yeah? Yeah, on the Common App, it asks, what your test scores were, and then it'll ask them, do you plan to take them again? And if so, what's the date? So they'll know to be looking forward to scores. Everything. Yeah, everything. Yep, they have to get busy. Yep, everything by October 12th if they want to participate in that. Yep.
Should your student doesn't meet
early decision criteria, because they're looking for regular decision, should they not go themselves and maybe wait to do a better essay better? Or do you think this is their best chance?
I would take advantage of the app.
Okay.
The advantage is certainly there. They might say to the student, look, what we would like to see is you to retake the SAT, or get another letter of recommendation, or wait until we see. I have not seen them do that where they ask for another letter or another. If they've met the requirements, that's okay. But they might wait and see their grades for the first semester senior year. Yeah.
You say the College Board has to release the SAT scores. You do the Common App, the student does the Common App, and they enter what they received on the SATs to date. We also, I assume, at some point have to release the schools that we're going to be applying to scores, right? Is that done in conjunction, waiting until you've actually done submitted the Common App before you release your scores to that school?
Yeah, so when you fill out Common App, you will enter the scores on the SAT that you have so far. And you can submit it through. Most of the schools that participate in Common App will take the SAT scores from the high school transcript. They'll accept those as official. Not the self-reported student score, but when they see it on the transcript, they'll accept that. Otherwise, schools will request directly to the student that they need to have College Board send the scores
So the particular school will communicate that back,
to the student.
otherwise the assumption is the transcript.
Correct. Yep. And actually, that brings up another really good point. When the student applies to college, the university will communicate with the student, except to send the bill, right? They'll send the bill to you, but they'll only communicate with the student. So it's vitally important that you make sure the student has a valid email address that they use and check often. So that way they don't miss any communications. They don't call the school and say, oh, could you tell us the test scores? They'll ask the student. So that's why I say it's really important to have that student be in the lead. And then what we do in the background is say, hey, did you check your email? Did you hear anything from UMaine? Did you hear anything from us? Did you hear? It's important to do that in the background. Okay? Yeah?
When you say that UMaine is coming, is that just the Orno one? Because my daughter's interested in USM.
It's just Orono so far. USM came last year, and I'm assuming they will want to again. I don't have that scheduled yet. But usually it's later in October, maybe November when they do that. Yeah.
So is this app day for UMaine, is that like an early decision where it would not be then applying to other schools?
No, they can still apply. Absolutely. So even if if a student has like a whole bunch of schools they want to apply to, and UMaine is one of them, I would still encourage them to do the app day. Get a decision from UMaine. Save the $40 on application fees, and then go ahead and apply to other schools. They don't have to commit until May. So it's nice to have one in the bag and already know that it's taken care of. And I've seen it over the last few years. That app day can be a jolt to some students to say, hey, I guess I better get my act together. Other students, it boosts their confidence. Hey, I've already been accepted. I've gotten in. I've got it. I'm going. Some of them, that's the school they wanted to go to begin with, and they're done. And they can just concentrate on having a good senior year. Yep.
So app day is November 19th. You yes or no at that point. If you don't go to app day, is there a date that they are supposed to get that to you?
Yeah, the University of Maine last year had their largest application pool they've ever had. It went up by over 20%. If they're trying to go to UMaine for nursing or for engineering, The application deadline is December 1st. Anything else, it's rolling admissions, so they can get their applications in later. Sooner is better than later, but they can apply into January.
So if they came in by October 12th, I think you said for early admission,
Yep.
then it'll just.
It'll be all set. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna move along a little bit so we can get it over to Nikki. But if there are any more questions, certainly about this process, we can take them at the end. I just wanted to show you really quick the stuff that's on the transcript and what's on the school profile. These are two documents that I send out as part of the college application. When the student tells me they've applied, I have to upload these two documents right away. I know you're far away, but generally speaking, this is what a transcript looks like. Each year of high school, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior, all of their grades are on there. Their SAT scores, their weighted and unweighted GPA, their class rank, all of those things are there, as well as what the requirements were for high school graduation. This is their academic record. This is the most important piece to the whole application to get consideration. There's also a 2-page document, actually 1 page front and back. It's called the school profile. For a school that is not, a college that is not familiar with Bangor High School, an out-of-state school, something that's far away, they're going to want to know what the learning environment is in this building. This document gives perspective. You get a list of grades and a list of classes that they took. The college needs to know, did they take the most rigorous classes that were available? How did they do compared to other students? So forth. So this document is really important, and I share that in the application. We only print a certain number of them. If anybody is interested in getting a copy of the profile to see what it looks like, you're more than welcome to let us know in the guidance office. We'll get you a copy of them. AP scores, SAT scores, all kinds of school-wide data that puts the students' learning in perspective of the environment that was available to them. Net price calculator, I'm going to leave that to Nikki to talk about. After a student is accepted into college, the process doesn't end. There's financial aid awards that you have to consider. You have to consider the value, your ability to pay, and kind of weigh out, which ones you get accepted to. You have to make a choice. And then by May, you actually decide which one you're going to attend, and sign up for classes, sign up for housing. That stuff all would happen in May and June, and then you're off to college. As far as the scholarships available here in Bangor, they take several different forms. There's obviously the ones that Nikki talked about that you can apply to online, but scholarships that are specific to students at Bangor High School. The two most common forms are scholarships that get sent to us throughout the school year. Many arrive in the mail randomly. Some have already started to arrive, not too many. But towards December, a lot of clubs, organizations will send us applications for their specific scholarship. We have a binder. I mean, these are paper-generated scholarships, so the most effective way for us to update them is we have a binder. We add these to the binder. There are copies of the scholarships in there. Students are welcome to come in and take a look periodically to see if any new scholarships have arrived. Those ones are kind of clunky and cumbersome, but I do encourage students to do that because generally those scholarships don't get a lot of applications. They require footwork by the student. So encourage your son or daughter. We have reminded the students. We will remind them again and again. Check the binder. It changes weekly, daily, especially once January comes around, and that's when they really start flowing in. But if you've been to an academic awards night or to a graduation for Bangor High School, you've seen this long list of scholarships that are awarded to a lot of students, and some of them are very large, $8,000, $10,000, there's a $40,000 one even. But a lot of them even 250, 500, 1,000, they add up. We have a long list of scholarships that we manage locally, and that is done usually in March. I know a lot of people start asking in December, should we be applying for scholarships? That long list of scholarships that you hear announced at graduation requires a one-page application. One application for all of the scholarships. There's a local committee that awards those scholarships here. So your student will get an application for those scholarships, usually right after February vacation. And those are decided in April at a meeting, and then they're awarded in May at academic awards. So again, check with guidance periodically. Parents are welcome to come in and look through the binders as well to see what's there if you're curious. But the students are here in the building. Encourage them when they have a study hall before school or after school to give a poke through and see what's in the binder. Okay, and then they'll fill out the application for the rest of them in March. Okay. Any other questions or anything like that? Thank you so much. Oh, yes, go ahead.
My son is attending two high schools. Should he request additional changes in that high school and another profile?
No, if any student has, actually, the profile is a good idea. If your student has attended more than one high school, all of the grades from the previous high school come to us, and they're incorporated into our transcript. They're listed as transfer credits, and all of the classes that you should took would be added in there. The profile would be a good document that I can coordinate with the other school and send along, because what a college would like to see is the learning environment. If they spend 2 years at a different high school, they might offer different classes, and yeah, it couldn't hurt. Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to throw into as I was sitting here, I was thinking too, in the college application process, there is a box on Common App that says, is there anything else that you would like to add that could help the application? I would encourage you to consider filling that box in. If you have a unique experience that there was nowhere else to add it in, if you're in the STEM Academy, you wanted to include a statement about your research project, if you had some other kind of experience, include those things in. The more you add, the better. Also, even if you're not going to college for music and you have a musical talent, since applications are electronic now, it's very easy for you to make a video for YouTube, like we're doing tonight, and upload it and provide a link on the application. If you say you play the guitar, sometimes it might be easier to show them that you can do that. And so the application becomes more of a human experience. So there's all kinds of little tricks and twists and things like that. But I guess if you have one takeaway from tonight, it's that the student themselves has to be a very strong participant in the process, and they have to communicate, they have to check with the universities as they communicate with the student, not anybody else, and also to meet deadlines. That's one big thing that I think really throughout both halves of the presentation is communication and deadlines, staying on track. Are you missing something? The best way to find out if a deadline is approaching is to ask a guidance counselor, talk to somebody at FAME, talk to somebody at the university that you're applying to. So stay active and stay involved. There's no such thing as asking too many questions or that's our job, bug us. Okay?